At 8:15 p.m. on June 8, 1953, rush hour traffic moved normally through downtown Flint. The Dort Highway was busy, with evening commuters heading home. Weather stations reported calm conditions. But in the next 20 minutes, 116 lives would end, and modern tornado forecasting would begin. What happened that Tuesday night challenged everything meteorologists thought they knew about severe weather? The storm that destroyed Flint revealed secrets about tornadoes that science is still uncovering today. The summer of 1953 was already proving unusual across America's heartland. Meteorologically speaking, the nation was experiencing a pattern of extreme weather instability. In the days leading up to June 8th, a powerful cold front had been pushing eastward across the Great Lakes region, colliding with warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico. This classic setup for severe thunderstorms was being monitored, but with primitive tools by today's standards. Weather forecasting in the early 1950s was still an emerging science. At the time, the agency responsible for national forecasts was the US Weather Bureau, now called the National Weather Service. The US Weather Bureau had only begun issuing tornado forecasts in March 1952, just 15 months before the Flint disaster. Prior to that, the word tornado was actually banned from forecasts because officials feared causing public panic. Forecasters worked without weather satellites, Doppler radar, or computer models. Their primary tools were surface observations, weather balloons, and rudimentary radar systems that could detect precipitation but not rotation or wind velocity. On that fateful Monday, June 8, 1953, the US Weather Bureau had noted conditions favourable for severe thunderstorms across the region. A bulletin issued that morning mentioned scattered thunderstorms, some locally severe. No specific tornado warning was issued for Flint or Genesee County. This was not negligence, but reflected the limitations of the era's forecasting capabilities. The tornado that would strike Flint was part of a larger multi-day outbreak of tornadoes across the Midwest and the Northeast. Just 5 days earlier, on June the 3rd, another F5 tornado had devastated Worcester, Massachusetts, killing 94 people. These two catastrophic tornadoes, occurring within days of each other, would later be studied as potentially connected events, part of a single massive weather system that meteorologists at the time could not fully comprehend. As evening approached on June 8th, atmospheric conditions over Michigan were reaching a critical tipping point. A powerful updraft was forming northwest of Flint. The collision of warm, moist air at the surface with cooler, drier air aloft created the perfect environment for extreme vertical development in thunderstorms. By 8 o'clock in the evening, a massive supercell thunderstorm had developed. Without modern radar, forecasters could not detect the ominous hook echo that would have indicated rotation. The storm's rapid intensification was extraordinary, even by today's standards. In less than 30 minutes, it evolved from a severe thunderstorm into what meteorologists would later classify as an F5 tornado, the most violent category on the Fujita scale, with winds exceeding 260 miles per hour. This speed of development, combined with the tornado's unusual appearance, would prove especially deadly. Many Flint residents later reported that they never saw the classic funnel cloud. Instead, witnesses described a massive dark wall of debris. This phenomenon, now understood as a rain-wrapped tornado, was particularly dangerous because it masked the funnel, making visual identification nearly impossible until it was too late. At exactly 8:30 in the evening, the tornado touched down 3 miles northwest of Flint. Initially appearing as a relatively narrow funnel, it rapidly expanded as it moved northeast at approximately 35 miles per hour. Within minutes, it grew into a monster, with a damaged path ultimately reaching 800 yards wide, nearly half a mile of pure destruction. The tornado's path took it directly through the Beecher district, a densely populated suburban area north of Flint. This working-class neighborhood, home to many of Flint's automotive workers and their families, would bear the brunt of the tornado's fury. The first structures hit were along Coldwater Road, where entire blocks of homes were instantly reduced to splinters. Survivor. Mary Withers recalled that it sounded like 1,000 freight trains. She lost her husband and 2 children that night. She said the pressure was so intense her ears felt like they would burst, and then their house just disintegrated around them. As the tornado tore through the Beecher district, it displayed the erratic behaviour that makes tornadoes so terrifying. On some streets, it destroyed every home. On others, it demolished one house while leaving a neighbouring structure virtually untouched. This seemingly random pattern of destruction is now understood as a product of multiple vortices rotating within the main funnel, a complex tornado structure that creates intense variation in wind speeds across short distances. Robert Johnson, a factory worker driving home when the storm hit, provided one of the most harrowing accounts. He said he saw it coming and tried to outrun it. His car was lifted off the ground and he was spinning in the air. When he woke up, he was in a field 300 feet from the road. His car was wrapped around a tree, but somehow he had been thrown clear. The most devastating aspect of the Flint tornado was its timing. Striking during early evening when families were gathering for dinner and workers were returning home, it caught people in their most vulnerable places, their homes, their cars, their community spaces. Within minutes, the landscape was transformed. Where neat rows of houses had stood were now only foundations and scattered debris. First responders arriving on scene described apocalyptic conditions. Police officer James Rutherford, one of the first to reach Coldwater Road, later said, "It looked like a bomb had gone off. I had served in World War II, and this was worse than anything I saw overseas. People were wandering around in shock, bleeding, looking for family members. And the worst part was, it was getting dark, and we were trying to find survivors in the rubble with flashlights." The tornado continued its destructive path for 27 miles before finally dissipating. In its wake, it left 116 people dead, making it the deadliest tornado in Michigan history. Over 844 people were injured, and more than 340 homes were completely destroyed. The property damage, estimated at $19 million in 1953, equivalent to about $200 million today, represented an enormous economic blow to the community. Among the dead were entire families. The tornado did not discriminate, claiming the lives of infants and elderly, rich and poor alike. Perhaps most heartbreaking were the stories of those who almost survived. A father who had gotten his family to the basement was killed when the house's water heater fell through the floor. A mother was found dead, still cradling her infant, who somehow survived. Within minutes of the tornado's passage, as the true scale of the disaster became clear, Flint faced an unimaginable crisis. Emergency systems were quickly overwhelmed. Hurley Hospital, Flint's main medical facility, was flooded with hundreds of injured victims, arriving by ambulance, police car, and private vehicles. Medical staff worked around the clock, performing emergency surgeries by flashlight when power failed. The response from ordinary citizens was extraordinary. Hundreds of volunteers immediately began searching through rubble for survivors. Construction workers brought heavy equipment to lift collapsed walls. Farmers arrived with tractors to clear roads. Local businesses opened their doors, providing food and shelter for the suddenly homeless. People came from everywhere to help, remembered nurse Margaret Collins. Doctors who were not on duty rushed in. Regular people with no medical training were helping us move patients, hold IV bags, whatever needed doing. I have never seen humanity at its best like that night. The Michigan National Guard was deployed by midnight, establishing security perimeters and assisting with search and rescue operations. The American Red Cross set up emergency shelters in schools and churches. By morning, a massive aid operation was underway. The scale of the disaster required improvisation. The Beecher High School gymnasium was converted into a temporary morgue where families came to identify loved ones, an experience so traumatic that many survivors could not speak about it for decades. Local funeral homes were overwhelmed and multiple mass funerals were held in the following days. media coverage brought national attention to Flint's plight. Newspapers across the country ran front-page headlines about the disaster. Radio reports broadcast urgent calls for blood donations and emergency supplies. President Dwight D. Eisenhower declared the area a federal disaster zone and released government funds for recovery. The response extended beyond immediate rescue operations. Insurance companies set up field offices in tents to begin processing claims. Utility companies worked non-stop to restore power and gas. The United States Postal Service established temporary facilities to maintain mail delivery. Every aspect of normal life had to be reorganized amid the chaos. Perhaps most remarkable was the psychological support that emerged. In an era before critical incident stress, debriefing was standard practice. Clergy and community leaders organized group counseling sessions. Churches became gathering places where survivors could share their experiences and begin processing their trauma together. Reverend William Thomas, who lost his church in the tornado, recalled that they did not have therapists or counselors like today, but they had each other. People talked, they cried together, they prayed together. That is how we started to heal. The Flint tornado of 1953, combined with the Worcester tornado just days earlier, became a watershed moment in American meteorology. The devastating loss of life in both disasters, a combined total of 210 deaths, created immense public and political pressure for better warning systems. Dr. Tetsuya Theodore Fujita, who later developed the famous Fujita scale for tornado intensity, conducted detailed damage surveys in both Worcester and Flint. His meticulous research revealed crucial insights about tornado formation and behavior that had previously been misunderstood. Fujita's discoveries about multiple vortex tornadoes and suction spots fundamentally changed scientific understanding of these phenomena. The United States Weather Bureau, facing criticism for its inability to provide adequate warnings, accelerated development of a nationwide tornado warning system. Within months, a comprehensive plan for a network of weather surveillance radars was approved. This initiative would eventually evolve into NEXRAD, known as Next Generation Radar, the system used today, and it can detect rotation within storms before a tornado even forms. The Flint disaster also led to significant improvements in emergency response protocols. The lessons learned about coordinating multiple agencies during a mass casualty event influenced disaster management practices nationwide. The concept of establishing a unified command structure, now standard in emergency management, emerged partly from the experiences in Flint. Building codes across Michigan and eventually nationwide were revised to include better structural resistance to high winds. While no conventional residential construction can withstand a direct hit from an F5 tornado, the improved standards have saved countless lives during less intense tornadoes. Modern requirements for anchoring walls to foundations and roofs to walls are direct descendants of lessons learned in Flint. Public education about tornado safety also underwent a revolution. The Weather Bureau launched campaigns to teach Americans about warning signs and proper shelter procedures. The practice of conducting tornado drills in schools became standardized. The severe weather warning system we take for granted today, with its familiar sirens, radio alerts, and now smartphone notifications, exists in large part because of what happened in Flint in 1953. The community itself was forever changed. The Beecher district was rebuilt, but the collective trauma remained. For decades, long-time residents would divide their personal timelines into before the tornado and after. Annual memorial services continue to this day, ensuring that younger generations understand this pivotal moment in their community's history. A permanent monument now stands on Coldwater Road, listing the names of the 116 victims. Each year on June 8, 1953, residents gather there to remember not just the tragedy, but the extraordinary response it inspired. The memorial's inscription perhaps best captures the tornado's legacy. Their lives were taken in minutes, but their sacrifice changed how we protect ourselves from nature's fury forever. Perhaps the most profound legacy is one measured in lives saved. In the 7 decades since the Flint disaster, tornado, fatality rates in the United States have declined dramatically, despite population growth in vulnerable areas. The average lead time for tornado warnings has increased from essentially 0 in 1953 to about 13 minutes today. Modern supercell thunderstorms that might have struck without warning in the 1950s are now typically tracked for hours before they produce tornadoes. The scientific advances sparked by the Flint tornado continue to evolve. Today's meteorologists use sophisticated computer models, dual polarization radar, and artificial intelligence to predict tornado formation with increasingly remarkable accuracy. Each improvement can trace part of its lineage back to the questions that emerged after that terrible night in 1953. When a tornado warning is issued today and families safely take shelter before a storm arrives, they are experiencing the invisible protection built from the lessons of Flint. Those 116 lives lost on June 8, 1953, have potentially saved thousands of others in the decades since. The deadliest tornado in Michigan's history became, in a profound way, a turning point in humanity's age-old struggle to protect ourselves from the atmosphere's most violent manifestation. On that summer evening, a community's tragedy became the catalyst for a revolution in how we understand, predict, and survive nature's most terrifying phenomenon. If you found value in this deep dive into meteorological history, hit subscribe to join the Tornado Attacks community. Every week, we analyse history's most devastating storms and the science behind them. Leave a comment about which historic tornado you would like us to investigate next, and follow us for exclusive updates on upcoming episodes. Your support helps us continue uncovering the hidden stories behind nature's most powerful forces.